Hello and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm in a slightly different background. As you can see, I have moved. All we have here is the same sofa as I had before, so from now on if you hear a bit of an echo then I apologize. There's not much going on right now, but slowly I'll be decorating and making this place be more of a home. But today we're going to be talking about writing a reflective essay. Now this came into mind because I received quite a few reflective essay documents at the Page Doctor, particularly from students from like a nursing background or a sort of media communications background, and I found that I was saying the same thing for feedback. Now a reflective essay is important because it means that you are critically analysing a past event or a past experience in order to reflect upon it and improve or deduce a learning point. Now unlike other type of essays, reflective essay is quite unique in that you do need to understand how to write reflectively to be able to actually write it, because it does form the core element of a reflective essay. And so today I'm going to be talking about a principle and a model that you can use to write reflectively and to write a strong reflective essay. And this framework is called the 5R framework for reflection. It's actually a model that was deduced and published in a few papers from a researcher called Bain and his team. I'll leave a few links for it down below if you want to read it in a bit more detail. And I'm going to be going through the 5 different steps for how to reflect and how to plan a reflective essay, and then how to write it and how to write it effectively enough that it is a strong reflective essay. So keep on watching if you want to see this, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel to see more from me. I post every Wednesday and Sunday, and most of you that watch me are not subscribed to my channel, so what are you waiting for? I'll give you a second, go for it. Press the subscribe button so you can see more from me, and keep on watching to find out how to write a reflective essay. Now there are a couple of different models that you can use to write a reflective essay, and there isn't really a fixed model that you should use. However, I found that this one that I'm going to be talking about today helps you really engage with your experience, helps you engage with the reflection, and helps you think a lot more critically. Sort of the top marks that come from reflective essays are to do with not just writing about the particular situation itself, but more about how you built from that. So how are you engaging with the literature that's appropriate to your experience? How are you engaging with your actual experience and your feelings? And also how are you using that to be able to improve next time, and what have you learned from that process? And so this model really forces you to think about all of those different aspects. There are other models as well, and I'll leave the links for them down below in case you are interested in using a slightly different method, but this one is the most wholesome and covers everything that you really should be writing about in a reflective essay. Now the 5 different points of this framework are the following: reporting, responding, relating, reasoning, and reconstructing. Now if I just read off what each of these are from the actual paper itself, it is reporting the context of the experience. Responding is you're responding to the experience, so you're kind of saying how you felt about it at the time. Then you're relating the experience to current literature. So that could be knowledge that you have, skills that you have, but also other papers and other sort of studies that are related to your particular situation. And then reasoning, so thinking more about theoretical aspects of your experience. This is where you're going into more subject-specific language. And then lastly, it says reconstructing your practice by planning future actions for a similar experience. So this is where you are giving yourself recommendations for how you do things better, and you're explaining what you've taken away from this experience, because the whole point of reflecting is being able to reflect and say, right, this happened, this didn't go that well, or it did go well, and this is what I want to implement in the future to have a better experience. So for the first one, reporting. Now reporting is just setting the scene. When you're writing a reflective essay, before you just go into it and say, I didn't like this and I didn't like this, you first need to give context to what the situation was. So what happened? How did things happen? What was the situation? What was your place? And what was your kind of role in this particular context? You want to briefly, not in too much depth, you don't have to go into all the depth of the situation, but you want to briefly reflect on, kind of describe what exactly happened. You're just reporting the detail. In this section, you're not giving any interpretation, you're not discussing, you're not really saying much of your feelings either. It's purely just reporting, this happened, that happened, I was here, I was there. It was literally just a report of the situation and the event. And for this, you want to use past tense because it is an event that happened in the past. So you would say, I did this, or I was involved in, and also who else was involved? Was it you? Was there someone that you were shadowing? I've read quite a few from like nursing students and PAs as well, who have written sort of reflections, or midwifery too, who've written reflections on their experience during their placements. And for the start, you just want to set the scene. Who were you with? Where were you? What was your, what was the department? Just set the scene so the reader is able to, I guess, be placed in your particular event before they then read on to find out what exactly happened. And then we're moving on to the responding section. Now here is where you're starting to bring a bit more thoughts and feelings into the particular reflection. So here is where you're giving your standpoint about what happened. And so you can use words such as I thought, I felt like, I believe, words that kind of show what your emotions were at the time. And this should encompass sort of your thoughts, your feelings, any observations that you might have had during that time. So you've set the context, you've said, what the situation is, then you put yourself in that place and you're personalizing the experience now, and you're saying what your thoughts were, what your feelings were, and how it made you feel, and even just raising some potential questions that you might want the reader to think about pertaining to how you were feeling at the time, and not necessarily kind of interpreting it as of yet. And you also want to use some language that connects feelings and thoughts. So for example, subsequently this happened, then this happened, firstly this happened. So you're joining, right, this thing happened and then this happened. So you're kind of making it into a nice little story where you're putting yourself in the place as the person that's happening to. And then the third part is responding. Now here you are responding to the situation and trying to relate it to any skills or experience that you might have. So some questions that you might want to ask yourself is, for example, where have I seen this before? What can I relate this to? What knowledge do I have in this particular situation? And also, what was similar or different to what happened in this event to what may have happened to you before? Now for this, some language that you can use is, for example, this reminds me of when. And the reason why you're using present tense is because you're basing it off of a past event, but you're reflecting right now. So you're basing it in the kind of current tense. So that should be present. And also you want to use terms that are comparative as well. So things like similarly, this was similar to, terms that show that there is similarity or differences to events that may have happened to you in the past. So this is all up to do with being as critical as possible and reflecting as much as possible on the particular event that you are reflecting upon. Then fourthly, and this is actually the most, not necessarily the most important, but kind of the highly rated and where the higher marks come from, is the reasoning part of reflection. And here you are trying to make sense of what's happened. So usually you might want to use some literature. Do look at what your requirements ask you about, but for the most part, sometimes you look at literature or theory to make sense of the event and why things panned out the way they did. So you want to think about any theoretical literature that might help you understand the situation a bit better. Let's say you were a nurse and you saw someone dispensing or prescribing medicine in a certain way and you were unsure, but you asked and you were pushed aside or something. You can use your framework because you have that nursing framework that I read about. You could use that as literature and saying, actually, I should have been taught about this, or I should have been explained step by step, or whatever. I'm just giving an example. Obviously, I'm not a nurse, but you can use literature and actual skills and theory to explain situations, explain why things should or shouldn't have happened the way they did. Also, to be critical, you want to think a bit more about different perspectives. So how would, let's say you're a student, how would a qualified doctor or nurse or PA or someone, how would they react to this? Is the way that you reacted appropriate, or could things have been done differently? And again, try to use literature to support what you're saying, because it really shows that you're not just reflecting on a personal level, but you're reflecting on an academic level as well, which is really important, especially for an academic piece of writing. I mean, even though it's reflective and it seems quite sort of personal and a bit like a diary, it's still going to be marked academically and using a structure. So it is important that you include some literature here that can support what you're stating. And the last section is reconstructing, and this is a bit of, I guess, future plans, what I mentioned earlier about how you want to build upon your experience and figure out how you would do things better. Here's where you have to be really, I guess, honest with yourself, and this is where the real reflection, like the real usefulness of the reflection, comes out of it. There's no point of reflecting without taking away something from that experience. So what you want to do here is think about how you can do things differently next time, and essentially you're developing an action plan for future instances such as this. And again, you can use literature here, so you can either say based on the literature that you mentioned in the previous sections, in the reasoning sections, or you can mention new literature. So you can say, look, according to this particular theory or this particular piece of evidence, this is how I should have responded, or this is how things should have panned out, or how I should have learned, or whatever. And because it didn't, I do want to implement this in the future, and this is how I'm going to do it. So you can still use literature in this section as well to support your future plan. And you want to think about what the different options are. So you can say things like I will, or I might, or I can, words that show that you are going to implement a certain action. So try and think about how you're going to show that you have learned something. So you can even just use the terms I have learned that, or it is significant that, or I, through this experience, my big takeaway has been, to show that that you've reflected, you've understood how things could have been done differently, and you're going to put together this goal and this plan to do things differently next time. That is the key takeaway point. So it's really important for you to consider all 5 of these steps in order to write a strong reflection piece. And what I usually find missing is a bit about literature, so where you're including the skills and wider sort of reasoning. And then I also find missing future work, your future plan. A lot of the time people are really good at describing what happened. That's really easy. They're really good at describing how they felt. Again, that's quite simple, that's quite easy for us to do, but it's really hard for us to then take away from that something that we can implement into the next instance. So those are things that I find missing quite often, and hopefully this 5-step framework that I have just disseminated to you will help you writing a reflective essay in the future. If you did find this useful, then I would love it if you could give me a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.